All righty, we are live.
Right. Good evening and welcome to a virtual meeting of the City of Dublin's Architectural Review Board. The Ohio legislature passed several emergency laws to address the pandemic, including the ability for public entities to have virtual meetings. We appreciate this ability to maintain our continuity of government. For the present time, we are holding our meetings online and live streaming those meetings on YouTube. You can access the live stream on the city's website. The meeting procedure for each case this evening will begin with the staff presentation, followed by an opportunity for the applicant to make a presentation also. The board will then have the opportunity to ask clarifying questions prior to hearing public comments. Finally, the board will deliberate on each case based on the information introduced. In order to submit any questions or comments during the meeting, please use the form under the streaming video on the city's website. These questions and comments will be relayed by the board to the board by a member by the meeting moderator. We want to accommodate public participation to the greatest extent possible and welcome your comments on cases. Please use a valid name and address when submitting your comments and refrain from making any inappropriate comments. This is not a perfect system, but we do our best in these difficult times and we very much appreciate your patience. Now, if you would, staff, display the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, everyone, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So the next thing is roll call, please.
Mr. Alexander.
Here.
Ms. Bryan.
Here.
Mr. Cotter.
Here.
Mr. Kanacki.
Here.
Ms. Cram.
Here.
Thank you. And if I could get a motion to accept the documents into the meeting.
So moved. I'll second. Yeah.
All right.
Mr. Kanacki.
Yes.
Ms. Cram.
Yes.
Mr. Cotter.
Yes.
Mr. Alexander.
Yes.
Ms. Bryan.
Yes. And also a motion to for approval of the meeting minutes from the last meeting.
I'll make the motion to approve them. The meeting minutes, that is.
Okay.
Second.
Mr. Cotter.
Yes.
Ms. Cram.
Yes.
Mr. Kanacki.
Yes.
Ms. Bryan.
Yes.
Mr. Alexander.
Yes.
All right. So the next will be the swearing in for anyone who will be speaking at tonight's meeting. The Architectural Review Board is responsible for review of construction and modification or alteration to any site in the review district or area subject to architectural review under the provision of Zoning Code Section 153.177. The board has decision-making responsibility on these cases. A swearing in of anyone who intends to address the board on any of these cases is necessary. Anyone intending to address the board on cases, please raise your right hand and answer in the affirmative. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to this board?
I do.
Yes.
I do.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, we're going to move into new cases. First case is JK Orthodontist, a sign at 5 West Bridge Street, case number 20-108 MSP. This application is a request for installation of an 8 square foot projecting sign and retention of two existing window signs and 1 directory sign for tenant space located within the Town Center 2 development. The site is southwest of the intersection of Bridge Street and High Street and zoned Bridge Street District Historic Core. Mr. Honchell will be our presenter for this. And Zach, if you would, you can start your presentation.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Good evening. This is an application for review and approval of a master sign plan. This site is located at 5 West Bridge Street, which is located within the Old Dublin Town Center 1 development. This site is located at the southwest corner of West Bridge Street and South High Street. This tenant space was included in the sign package for the entirety of the Old Dublin Town Center 1 building. With the sign package, this tenant was approved for 1 projecting sign, which is located along West Bridge Street to the north, 2 window signs, which are both located on West Bridge Street and South High Street, and a directory sign, which is located to the rear of the site, which can be seen from the parking lot. This directory sign is located next to the entrance into the building for this tenant space. Since the acceptance of the Bridge Street District Code in 2012, the Bridge Street District Code supersedes the original sign package for this building. Similar to Jenny's Splendid Ice Cream application in 2013, any new signage for this building has to adhere to the Bridge Street District sign guidelines. So what this means for this tenant, because they are a 2nd-story tenant in a multi-tenant building, they are not permitted to have any wall-mounted signs along West Bridge Street or South High Street, because their entrance is located to the rear of the building. Any wall-mounted signage is required to be located adjacent to the entrance into the building. So a master sign plan was the only route to be able to maintain the existing location of the projecting sign. The applicant is proposing just 1 new sign tonight, which would be the projecting sign, which is located to the north of the building along West Bridge Street. This sign is approximately 6 square feet in size and sits 18 feet above grade. This measurement is measured from the top of the sign to grade. The sign will be constructed of 1.5-inch thick, high-density urethane material, and the colors chosen for this sign are a burgundy background, a gold leaf copy in the inner border, a white border, and a white and gold leaf image located in the center of the sign. The applicant is proposing to use the existing black bracket that is currently holding the projecting sign at this location. The applicant is also including the 2 window signs and directory sign with this application, but are not making any modifications to those signs. Planning staff is recommending that the applicant revise their sign plan to incorporate a 1/2-inch relief, which can be done by routing of the sign for both the copy and the border. This recommendation is similar to previous recommendations for similar sign plans within the district. Planning staff has reviewed this application to all applicable criteria and are recommending approval with 1 condition tonight. If the commission or the board has any questions for staff, I am happy to answer them. If not, the applicant is also here to address the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the applicant have any comments?
There we go. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So when I became a tenant, it was in 2000 when Pat Grable built the building. So one of the things about the signing the lease was, well, there's no signage in the parking lot at Starbucks. So there's 10,000 cars that come by, and the original lease included the hanging sign where it is now and the window gold letters of my name. So 20 years goes by, and now my name really doesn't mean anything when you go to sell a business. So now it's more of a brand. So because I'm listening to the gurus of when I sell someday, probably in 5 years, a brand is better. Although my name is associated with the brand, it sells better. So also what's going on in society is aligners. Now you've heard of Invisalign, but I invented my own brand called Line 'em Up. Now that may be something that isn't appropriate for that. I get it, but it is a brand, and Jenny's is a brand, and I've always conformed with all the colors and everything. And then I look downstairs one day and I see Jenny's orange and yellow and a white bracket and lights all over it. It doesn't really bother me, but I thought I'd bring some color to that. And I've been asked to do it in green and gold. And then I've been asked to take it down because it's too close to her sign, even though I've been there since the day the place opened. So I don't want a sideboard. I just want my letters in the window and a replacement sign that makes everybody happy, because both sides of the intersection can see it. If I have to move my sign down 10 feet away, then one of the intersection roads won't see it at all. Then I'm going to ask for two hanging out on each side 10 feet away from Jenny's, which I really don't want to do. But there's no way to have a hanging sign in the parking lot because there's 10,000 cars that come by, and my lease is up in January, and I may tell the owner, look, I got to sell this someday. And if we can't get a sign for the new tenant or the new buyer of the place, what am I going to do? So these are the concerns I have.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments?
We do not have any public comment on this application.
Okay. Board members, do you have any question for the applicant or staff?
Nope, pretty good.
Okay.
Does the applicant have any problem with the condition brought up by the planners?
Well, I don't understand it, so you got to help me.
Okay.
I don't know what half-inch means. I don't do this stuff.
Zach, you're up.
2 braces in tenths of millimeters, you know?
Absolutely. So the condition is something that's been pretty consistent with previous sign applications. All it means is that the border in the copy, so that the text on the sign is going to have some dimensionality to it, so it'll be routed out a 1/2 inch into the sign. That's really all that is pertaining to.
Okay,
So
well,
it's just not-
Danelle, I think Danelle's here. She's the sign company person, and she's done a great job for me. Maybe she can comment on that.
Yeah, a 1/2 inch, just the letters is what you want, a 1/2 inch, or do you want the teeth also a 1/2 inch?
We had just mentioned it as the copy, excluding the teeth in the border of the sign.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, do you care if it's a V groove or what kind of 1/2 inch?
We can determine that probably following, unless the board had any preference.
Okay.
So let's go into board discussion. So Frank, how are you feeling about this?
I'm fine with it
With
as
the
it stands.
Okay. Sean,
Same. I don't have any concerns or any issues.
Gary,
Well, I'm fine with it as well.
okay. Amy,
Yeah, I'm fine. It's only fair to let him do the same thing he already has. If it was a new application, I'd have issues, but it's exactly what he has now, so.
okay. Is it exactly what he has now?
It is, I mean, he has a hanging sign in that exact same spot. All he's doing is changing the look of his sign. So I don't feel it's fair to tell him he can no longer hang a sign in the exact same place he has a sign.
Exactly. All right. So I'm looking for a motion to approve with the exception to do the, I gotta talk to IT about how fast this thing goes down. The approval for the master sign with one condition: the applicant revise the sign to, sign plan to provide a 1/2 inch relief on the border and copy of the sign via routing to add dimensionality to the proposed sign.
So moved.
Okay, second?
Oh, second.
Okay.
Second.
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Ms. Cram,
Yes.
Mr. Kanaki,
Yes.
Ms. Bryan,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander.
Yes.
So, Doctor, you can have your sign person work with staff on the details of this, but you
Yes.
are approved to go forward.
Well, thank you so much. That was easy.
Good. Thank you.
We try
Thanks.
to do that.
I enjoy being downtown on Old Dublin. So thanks again.
Thank you.
We're glad to have
Bye.
you.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.
If we could take a brief pause. Currently, IT is confirming that the meeting is running according to planned. So a brief intermission of silence, if you will.
Jenny, can you give me back the hosting rights, please?
Get it?
So the information that I have is that it's working on YouTube, but not on the city's website.
Okay. That means that it is streaming live, but the link from the city's website is not. I'm going to see if I can fix that, but since it is streaming live, you can go ahead and and keep going.
Okay, that sounds
good. It's just that link that's not working, so I can fix that. Just leave hosting rights with me if you would.
Okay. Yep.
You may need to. I may need to turn sharing back on.
And can you let the next case number 2 applicant in if we're going to proceed?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, is the applicant in?
Hang on one second, please.
Okay.
Case 2, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I have let them in.
Okay. So we're ready to start on case 2, which is Domino's Pizza sign at 8 East Bridge Street. Case number 20-112 MPR. This application is a request for the installation of 2 5.5 square foot projecting signs and 1 4 square foot ground sign for an existing restaurant. The 0.13 acre site is northeast of the intersection of Bridge Street and High Street and Zone Bridge Street District Historic Core. Mr. Ridge will be our presenter for this case. Mr. Ridge, if you would start your presentation, please. Jace?
Well, it is just that kind of night because Chase is having difficulties. So I would be happy to present this case for him if you just give me one moment to pull up his presentation. Okay, good evening. This is a request for review and approval of a minor project review for signs for the site located at the intersection of High Street and Bridge Street in historic Dublin. This site is presently developed with a single-story, single-tenant building that has frontages on both High Street and Bridge Street. This is the existing structure. You'll notice in these photos, they are making some maintenance modifications. And as part of these updates, they are requesting new signs. This is a photo of the single existing sign on the site. This sign has been with the building and our records actually do not indicate when this was installed. So it must have been there for a while. Therefore, the applicant is requesting review and approval today of 2 projecting signs. These signs are proposed to be fabricated out of a high-density urethane and subsequently routed. The sign color is proposed to be blue with a white copy and the trademark logo. The sign is proposed to have 9 feet of clear distance beneath the sign, which meets the minimum requirement of 8 feet and is located within the 1st story of the building. This is the south facade, which faces Bridge Street. A companion sign facing North High Street is proposed to be located on the west facade. And finally, a ground-mounted sign is proposed to replace the existing sign. This sign is also a dimensionally routed 4 square foot sign proposed on a wood post with a aluminum yard arm. Staff has reviewed this against the minor project review criteria and Bridge Street District sign design guidelines, as well as the Architectural Review Board standards, and is recommending approval with no conditions this evening. I would be happy to answer any questions regarding this application. The applicant is also here as well this evening.
Okay. Is the applicant comment?
Sorry?
Does the applicant have any comments?
No, I mean, I think it was well presented.
Sorry. Could you state your name and address, please?
I'm sorry. Michael Cox with Day Night Sign Companies, 1640 Harmon Avenue, Columbus, Ohio.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And I think everything that we needed to say was in the report. There's really nothing else that I think that we could add that needs to be said. So.
All right. Thank you. Do we have any public comments on this?
We do not have any public comment on this application.
Okay. Does the board have any questions for the applicant or for Ms. Martin?
I actually have a question. Ms. Martin, you said it is a single tenant building. Does Domino's do they own it, or are they leasing both sections where like the baseball card shop used to be? Could a tenant still come into that space?
They are renovating and taking over both spaces. So,
okay, so Domino's will occupy the entire building.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. I was kind of worried about putting a tenant sign, thinking they might come back and ask to change it if you get a new tenant in the old baseball card.
No, I believe the intent is for that to be a small dining room there. Of course, they're not going to be able to use it yet, but we'll.
Okay, so it will be one tenant for the whole building.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Ms. Martin, you confirm that?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions by the board? Okay, we'll open for any discussion. Anything else anybody has concerns about? Okay, then I will call for a motion to approve this minor project with no conditions.
I'll make the motion to approve the minor project, no conditions.
Second?
Okay.
Ms. Cram,
Yes.
Mr. Kanaki,
Yes.
Ms. Bryan,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Mr. Cotter.
Yes.
All right. All right. If we'll let in then the last case, case number
All right.
3.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like our applicants for case 3 have been admitted.
Okay, thank you. All right, so our final case for this evening is 143 South High Street, case 20-068 INF. This is informal review. The application is the second request for an informal review and a non-binding feedback for revisions to a proposal for the construction of a 1.5-story, 4,000 square foot residence with a 3-car attached garage. The 0.25 acre site is southwest of the intersection of South High Street and John Wright Lane and is zoned Bridge Street District Historic Residential. Ms. Martin will be our presenter for this case. Nikki, go ahead when you're ready.
Great, thank you. Good evening. As mentioned, this is a second request for informal review and non-binding feedback. This application was previously before the board on June 3rd. The site is located at the intersection of South High Street and John Wright Lane and is 0.25 acres in size. The site is presently developed with a single-story residence and detached garage. The surrounding context of the site is primarily residential with the Dublin Chamber of Commerce located immediately to the north. This is an image of the existing residence and detached garage. This structure was built in 1890. The board at the June meeting previously deliberated on this structure as well as a proposal for new construction. At the meeting, the board provided non-binding feedback in support of demolition of the existing structure, in support of the simple vernacular architectural character of the proposed new construction. The board also provided consideration for encroachments into required setbacks, expressed concern with the total lot coverage and building footprint, and also encouraged that the mass and scale of the home be reduced on John Wright Lane. In response to the board's feedback, the applicant has taken the proposal from June, shown on your screen, and made revisions accordingly. Staff also shared the application with the city's historic preservation consultant. We felt it important to do that at this time, given the project is still at the formative stages where comments and tweaks may be beneficial to the board and the applicant. This is the proposal as of July. You'll notice here, as outlined in your staff report, the access point along John Wright Lane to the north side of the site has been shifted east approximately 20 feet at the request of the city engineer to provide greater separation between the intersection of Mill Lane and John Wright Lane. Additionally, the applicant has modified the proposed setbacks along the north and south sides of the property. The north setback has been increased from 4 feet to 5 feet, and the south setback, the encroachment of the at-grade patio has been eliminated. Additionally, with this revision, the applicant has reduced the total lot coverage from 62% to approximately 60 or 56%. The applicant has distributed this lot coverage across pervious and impervious surfaces. The impervious surfaces are approximately 48% of the site, with the pervious surfaces being approximately 8%. With the refinements, the applicant has selected conceptual proposed building materials that they are seeking feedback on this evening. The primary building material is a split veneer stone in a limestone finish. Additionally, an LP Smart Shake shingle siding is proposed in a white color, and an LP Smart side board and batten siding in a medium gray is also proposed. Other materials that are proposed and indicated in the applicant statement include a standing seam metal roof in a slate gray color or a weathered zinc, and also wood-clad windows in a charcoal or espresso color. The board has previously provided applicants feedback regarding the combination of materials and the window color. Staff specifically noted in the staff report that they have previously provided feedback on primarily white buildings with dark brown or black windows. These elevations depict the June proposal on the left-hand side and the July proposal on the right-hand side. You'll see the elevation facing South High Street remains largely the same. However, the applicant has made refinements. The gable L portion of the home is clad in the limestone veneer with a brick stoop. The north elevation facing John Wright Lane is proposed to be clad in a variety of materials. The historic preservation consultant did recommend the applicant consider simplifying the complex combination of materials. This elevation does incorporate 5 different materials, including the limestone veneer, horizontal siding, shake siding, as well as the vertical board and batten siding with a brick foundation. The architectural consultant noted that it is more historically appropriate for homes that are primarily stone to have a stone foundation and stone chimneys, although did note that a brick foundation may be appropriate for the attached garage, as garages were typically later additions to homes. It's important to note on the north and south elevations, the applicant has worked to reduce the mass and scale by reducing the footprint of the home by 171 square feet and reducing the footprint of the garage, shifting it south. Additionally, you'll notice the mass connecting the central side gable to the attached garage has been significantly reduced and is a low pitch roof connecting each structure below the eave line. This is the proposed west elevation facing the adjacent property owner at 140 Franklin Street and the driveway associated with this property. You'll notice in order to reduce the footprint of the garage, the pedestrian entry and exit on the west elevation has been eliminated. The historic preservation consultant did note in her report that if the occupied space within the garage was reduced or eliminated, there would be an opportunity to further reduce the mass and scale of the attached garage. Finally, the south elevation has been refined with the material selections as well as the reduced scale of the hyphen connector between the primary residence and the garage. The architectural consultant did hone in on the intersection of the brick chimney, the gable L stone masonry, and the lean-to addition, basically citing that there were potential opportunities to simplify the intersection of those 3 materials. Finally, the applicant has provided updated massing and scaling. This example is from June. With the revisions, the applicant has provided images depicting the mass and scale, particularly of the garage, both along John Wright Lane to the north and from the property at 155 South High Street to the south. With this, staff is recommending the Architecture Review Board consider if they support the proposed site layout and lot coverage, realizing the need for a waiver to lot coverage to exceed 50%. Does the board support the proposed mass and scale of the revised design in relation to the surrounding development pattern? And finally, does the board support the conceptual architectural details, including the materials and color palette? And then, of course, any other considerations by the board. I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, our applicants are here as well tonight.
Any questions for Ms. Martin?
I had just one, just because my first time. Can you hear me? There's a lot of feedback. What's the role of the Preservation Design Limited? They're just giving consulting advice, or what? When you look at this, what as a board, what do we do with the information they've given us? Is this something that it's just added material that we're looking at from their perspective, or what their, let's say, from their background, or just so I can be clear on what their role is?
Yeah, no worries. So we use a historic preservation architectural consultant. Her name is Christine Trebelis. She is a trained planner as well as a trained architect. And based on her architecture experience as well as her historic preservation experience, we rely on her to provide some additional expertise in regards to architectural forms and materials. To put it nicely, didn't go to school to be an architect, so there's obviously certain things that I may not be equipped to identify. So she helps us do that.
Okay, so she's working on the city's behalf just to add expertise in areas where there could be gaps in the planning staff somewhere like this.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question for Nikki. We've approved the Hardy siding as a product, as an alternative product in the past, which is a cement-based product. The LP Smart Side is a resin-based product. Have we approved that previously as an alternative material?
I'm not familiar with another project in historic Dublin that has used the LP Smart Siding.
Okay, okay. I wasn't either, but I'm just curious, something to be discussed. Thank you.
Okay, does the applicant have anything to add?
Yes, I'm Lance Schneer, 5455 Muirfield Court here in Dublin. And first want to thank you for the opportunity to be able to discuss this project with you once again. Two things before I turn it over to Rich, who will discuss the specifics. One, I just want to note for the record the cooperation and the professionalism of the staff that we've encountered here. I think we take that for granted sometimes. I know you all appreciate it, but I think the staff deserves that to be noted as well. We've spent the last 7 weeks since our June 3rd meeting incorporating the feedback that we received from the staff, from the engineers department, and obviously from the board to come back with improvements that Rich will discuss with you. We took everything very seriously, in part because the one aspect of Zoom that we can all agree on, probably the only positive one, is there's a record. So we didn't have to take notes about what you all said to us. We were able to rewatch the video and took careful notes of that. So I'm going to turn it over to Rich to talk about the general concepts, and if waiver discussions are still appropriate, I'd be happy to handle those. So Rich?
Well, as Lance said, thanks again for letting us do this a second time. We asked for this review to fill in some of the blanks from our previous presentation and to address the suggestions and questions from the ARB from the June meeting and the most recent planning report. The previous conceptual design drawings didn't specify any materials for the exterior because we wanted the board's input on that. And we've now made some preliminary decisions on those materials and have noted the locations of those on the submitted elevation drawings. We're planning for 3 major wall materials on the main L building at the front, the cottage, we're looking at a full thickness split veneer limestone, very similar to the stone that's been historically used in the district. On the center section of the building, we're looking at LP smart side straight edge shakes. And on the part of the building that is the garage, we're looking at the LP smart side board and batten. A quick comment about that, since Gary brought it up. LP is it is a resin-based product, but it's really a wood-based product held together with resin. And what I prefer about that versus the Hardy is that the LP product acts very much like wood. It can be cut, it can be shaped. It isn't a toxic material like the Hardy plank is. You have to wear a dust mask when you cut that material. In addition, the LP product has some flexibility during installation that the Hardy product doesn't have. So the projects I've worked on, the people that I work with prefer to use the LP product because it acts more like wood. The colors for the shakes are off-white for the board and batten, which is only the garage, and medium warm gray. And we've kind of intended to show roughly what that might look like on the color renderings that we put in there. The roof material for the entire building is planned to be standing seam metal, as we talked about previously. And we're looking at a natural finish material color on that, a slate gray or a weathered zinc color. We haven't picked a window manufacturer yet, but the windows will all be wood-clad, true divided light windows. And we'd like to have an espresso color or something similar to that on the exterior. We're interested in a darker color for the windows because in my opinion, darker colors have a subtle richness and expression you don't get with lighter colors. And because while we want the home to fit well into the historic district, we also want it to stand on its own without replicating existing historic details. We've also made a number of changes to the design and positioning of the house on the property to address the board's suggestions from June. The first is the lot coverage. We've really squeezed the house and the garage and taken 171 square feet out of the footprint. And significant areas of the development have been changed from impervious materials to pervious materials. The total lot coverage now stands at 48.1%, which is under the 50% limitation set forth in the applicable code section for single-family homes. Specifically, the walks at the front and side of the house will now be pea gravel, held in place by a geogrid, and I think the statement that I sent in has a conceptual image of what that might look like. The driveway apron and approach will remain concrete, as will the center of the parking pad, but the parking pad will have roughly an 18-inch wide border of permeable pavers set on a drained gravel base, and again, there's an image in there. We've also moved the outdoor living area on the southern side completely out of the setback and are planning to use a permeable paving product for that area, probably the same or similar to what we'd use around the driveway to keep the consistency there. At this point in the design process, we're looking at Belgard's Aqualine permeable paver system because it can handle the automobile traffic on the driveway and because it's installed with an underground drainage system that allows us to collect and direct stormwater to prevent excessive runoff. The soils around here, as I'm sure you all know, are that nasty clay stuff that doesn't drain well. So to prevent puddling, if we can't get good drainage in the areas where we want to use this product, the gravel allows us to install drainage to direct that where we need it to go. Reducing the overall footprint of the house also reduced the width slightly, and we're proposing to use that reduction to move the house further south away from John Wright Lane, which Nikki mentioned in her presentation. Part of the overall footprint reduction comes from reducing the length of the garage by about 4 feet. More importantly, we've changed the design of the mudroom area between the main body of the house and the garage to visually separate the two. We've done this by sliding the mudroom area to the south behind the front wall of the garage. As Nikki mentioned in the previous iteration, it was in front of the garage. So now the main house and the garage appear as two distinct masses. We've also completely removed the pitch roof from the mudroom area and replaced it with a nearly flat metal roof that's below the eave line of both the house and the garage. And as you can see on the north and the south elevations, we've changed the details and color of the garage to differentiate it even more from the main house. These changes disengage the massing of the garage from the main house, enhancing the separation between the two, and increasing the subordination of the garage to the main house as requested by the ARB. I wanted to mention comment on the consultant's comment about space over the garage. Excuse me. We want to keep that specifically because this site has rock almost at the surface, and it's probably going to be impossible to excavate that to create any kind of basement space under this house. And so any space that we can gain in attic areas and on tucked under the roof is going to be useful to my clients for storage. You probably noticed in the plans, there is a small stair at the front of the house going down to the basement, if we can get one. But if we do, it'll be small and just mechanical space. So the space above the garage is intended for storage. Finally, we've also met with the city engineer and have addressed their concerns about the location of the driveway relative to other access points nearby, and that was also mentioned by Nikki. There's a chart that was included with the with our statement that kind of outlines the different areas of the project and how they relate to the overall development, which I'm happy to talk to you about in more detail if you have questions. That's all I've got. Again, we'd like to thank you for your consideration of this and look forward to making a formal submission in the near future.
Thank you. For the board, any questions of the applicant? Okay. Nikki, I have a question because I'm hearing different numbers on this pervious, impervious, and how it, the 50%, it depends on who's talking, the number, can you help clarify this for me?
Yeah, sure. So the historic residential district limits lot coverage to a total of 50%. That lot coverage includes impervious and hard surface pervious areas, which the code calls semi-pervious. So basically any area that is developed with a structure or a surface is counted in the total lot coverage.
Okay, so we're still looking at over 50%.
Correct.
Based on your definition. Okay, yeah. That's what I thought, but I needed clarification. Thank you. Okay, so we have 3 questions.
Excuse me, could I speak on the coverage issue, please?
Yes.
I believe the applicable section, which is subsection 2D of 153.063B, the combined square footage for the historical, for our district, the combined square footage of all principal and accessory structures and impervious surfaces shall not exceed 50%. So there's an upper limit on, as Nikki indicated, but that does not count pervious in that 50%. So there is an opportunity for pervious surfaces above the 50%. That would be the clear reading, of this section, and it would be consistent with how other homes, new construction has been treated.
Well,
with research.
So Nikki, help me because I'm now confused again.
Yeah. So the code defines lot coverage as the part or percentage of a lot occupied by impervious or semi-pervious surfaces. And then the code goes on to define semi-pervious surfaces as a material that allows for the absorption of water into the ground or plant material, such as pervious pavers, permeable asphalt and concrete, or gravel. So a semi-pervious surface would be a surface that is completely pervious, but has the qualities of a hard surface.
Okay.
And that's the approach that we're taking, is that the hard surfaces are slightly below 50%, hard surfaces as defined, because there's also a definition of hard surfaces, which I could cite. And then we have impervious, semi-permeable surfaces, which when we file a formal application, we'll make sure that they do fit within the definition of semi-permeable. And those are the products that Rich has indicated. But we're spot on to make sure that we heard the board clear that the 50% lot coverage for buildings, appurtenances, ancillary buildings, and hard surfaces as those are defined, we're below that number. And we took great pains to do that.
Any other discussion on this from other board members?
Nikki, what section are you looking at? Just so I'm clear. I see the B, no, the D. But what's the other one? What defines it? Just so I can make sure I'm understanding it correctly.
Yeah, so those are in the general definitions sections of the code. So you received that part of your packet for next week.
Okay.
Well, so what's I'm confused about is staff is saying that we would need a waiver because you're over the 50%, and you're saying that you're under 50%. So this is where we need some clarity.
Mm-hmm. If I may chime in, may I?
Yes.
I think the issue is the definition of what's considered pervious versus impervious. So if the 48% number that we have discussed we're calculating everything that water drains through as pervious. What Nikki is saying is that a hard surface that still allows water to drain through, but is essentially a hard surface, is considered semi-permeable and therefore doesn't count. So that's where we're getting two different numbers. It's how the permeable paver system that we're proposing is being defined differently by us than it is by Nikki.
Okay, because you're saying the water would drain, but that's only because it's a special kind, but under other circumstances, it would be part of the 50%. I see. Yeah, I'm not sure I like that.
Nikki,
so I just have my personal opinion. I'm okay if we have pretty much, it's what we're saying is gravel, an 18-inch gravel apron on the along the driveway that would allow water to go through. I personally am okay saying that doesn't count as lot coverage. So if the staff says it does and it puts it over the number, in my personal opinion, that 2% or 3% that it puts it over because of the gravel, I'm okay with giving a waiver for. As long as the hard surfaces, the asphalt, the cement, the building stays under, because never do we, I guess, charge, if someone puts in a landscaping, a flower bed and has pea gravel in it, we're not counting that as a hard surface and we don't count that against them. So in that sense, I would be willing, if a waiver is required, to give them a waiver for that.
Here's my question. If this is the way the staff has been interpreting it on every project we've seen, and that's the standard that's been used, why do we change the standard here for this particular applicant? And I don't think it's a fair interpretation of code, if this is the standard that's been used, that we suddenly have a different standard here. So I find it difficult to support for that reason. This is the standard the staff's been using for years, and why would we apply a different standard here? Also, if you want to get technical, some of the communities, when permeable pavement is used, they only give a minimal credit against lot coverage for that because there's still runoff with it. It's the rate of runoff. And it's a material that needs significant maintenance over the years to be successful. It clogs. It needs to be maintained every year. So most communities do not see it as completely permeable. They give some credit for it. So just technically following the code and what that code states, and that it says the need for a waiver is caused by unique site conditions or circumstances outside the control of the owner, including easements right away. There is no unique circumstance on this site that would, I think, is rationale, following the code, that you can say is rationale for this waiver.
Okay, thank you all. So we have 3 questions to discuss in terms of, do we support the new proposed site layout and lot coverage, realizing need for a waiver to waiver on the coverage? So do we support the new site layout and lot coverage? That's question number 1. Question number 2 is, does the board support the proposed mass and scale of the revised design in relation to the surrounding development pattern? So let's discuss this. I think it's still way too big and it looks out of place in the spot that it's going to be in. That's my opinion. It does not fit in with the rest of the houses on the street. Anyone else?
I can go next. As far as the mass and scale, I think the only thing, so the high street elevation, perfect, fine, mass scale, everything's right. It still is that long elevation, the north and south. And there's two options, in my opinion, that I would approve it. Well, first of all, it greatly helps that you've gone 1 story on the mudroom and separated out the garage. So that greatly helps. I think if you want to leave the attached garage, it does have to go down to a 1 story and you would lose your space above the garage. So option A, in my opinion, keep it attached, but you got to take it down a size and make it a small garage. Option 2 would be to detach that garage. And I know you don't want to detach garage, but move it to as far west on the lot as you can and go ahead and keep your big garage. I would be okay with keeping it the size it is with the extra room on top if you detached it and moved it away from the house. So those are I think either of those, in my opinion, would probably fix any issue that I have along those 2 elevations. I don't think it's way off. If you look at the house, not the one immediately to the south, but if you look at the one to the south at the aerial, you're almost the same length as that. You're not really that much bigger than the chamber. I mean, you have a big parking lot behind the chamber anyway. So I don't think you're really far off, in my opinion. And I would approve one of the 2 options I just stated.
Okay. Gary?
I have trouble with the size. I mean, when you compare it to other development patterns in the community, it's too big. It's too big. And this amount, 48.1% lot coverage on any lot in any municipality, even in German Village. I just look at the auditor's website and the way the majority of buildings are covering the lot. The percentage is just too high. It needs a variance for us to approve it. And so I can't support the waiver, and I don't believe it fits the development pattern in the community. And I looked at the lot size because I was scratching my head. You know, is the problem the lot's too small? But when I compare it to the rest of the lots in the district, the lot's not too small. And none of the other new houses have asked for coverage close to this.
Thank you, Gary. Sean?
And I'm more with Amy. I think the side around John, they call it the long side for me, as you say, is it changes elevation. It feels too big on the lot, just generally from the link side. And I would agree when it drops down to the mudroom in the area and then it comes back up with the garage sitting out there. For me, it seems very disjointed. It doesn't feel like it flows very well. So it still feels for me too long. Maybe, Amy, I'm not sure. I'd have to look at it. If you detach the garage and left the space in there, does that somehow eliminate that? And then also on the pervious versus impervious, and with Gary, I mean, I feel like it's cheating the intent a bit by saying we're going to put something down. We couldn't make the coverage fit, so we're going to find a substitute at some point to do that. So yeah, I didn't know about all the maintenance you might have to do, but I see how it's going to clog and leak, whatever might happen in the future. So for me, lot coverage still, I find lot coverage more of an issue because it really, I mean, it's so big on the lot, and then on that one side, I think I could find a way if it fit inside the lot coverage to see how that the link would be okay. But for me, the lot coverage really still is an issue, and it just looks a little disjointed when it goes to the garage. I like moving it down, but somehow going back up looks strange to me.
Well, and depending on when you, for the applicant, when you're putting this forward, I mean, the new code calls for 45% lot coverage, not 50. So I think you need to keep that in mind. It's a timing thing. Frank?
I guess you could say I'm on the Camp Gary side. It is a very large, structure. 4,000 square feet is larger than most suburban homes in a lot of the neighborhoods of Dublin. So basically everything Gary said, I could agree with straight out.
Okay. All right. And then the last question is, does the board support the conceptual architectural details, including materials and color palette? Frank, why don't you start? What are your thoughts on that?
You say me, Kathy?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I broke up. I think it fits the neighborhood. The colors, it looks like the materials fit in. There was an oddity with having a brick foundation with a stone veneer. I thought that was a bit off, and I think that they covered that down, so they'd probably be willing to correct that issue. Otherwise, I didn't have any questions about it. Okay.
Sean?
Actually, I love the front. No, the change. I like the stone, how the thing looks. I think it looks. I think the front on High Street looks really nice. The other materials, I think the whole. Changing materials in every section for me looks it's to my eye. I like a little more consistency, but for me, I think the materials. Gary, to your point, or to who is that? Richard, to your point, if that say engineered material somehow works a little better and it holds up, for me it would be okay. But I didn't have any issue generally with what the color, let's say the general color scheme or the materials on there.
Okay, Gary.
My only question was the 4 wall materials facing John Wright Lane. I actually like the sketches that were presented at the last meeting, where you had a lot of variety just by the formal treatment of the structure, and you had a lot of variation there, but you had continuity. And it just seems kind of odd, the 3 gabled structures facing John Wright all having a different material, whereas the form doesn't change. The form is very similar. And usually when you look at buildings that have had additions, that addition on the back that might be a different material also has a different roof slope, and it has a different character. But when we look at, the gabled elements facing John Wright have the same slope. At least 2, and I don't have the drawings in front of me, have windows that are similarly proportioned in the gable. So I just wish there was just a little bit more continuity and maybe one less material along there, because it doesn't help me to see the masses being broken up by just changing the materials. But now the consultant's suggestion about the garage being a separate material, yeah, thank you for putting that up, Nikki. If the most of the structure along John Wright was the stone or the same material. And then when you went to the garage, that changed. And then you begin to see that as maybe an additive element. And whether or not the roof slope changes or becomes one story. I did think the connector change was very positive and does help, is a positive way of breaking up the mass. So.
Thank you. Amy?
Yeah, so I'll just go through a couple things that was in the consultant. One, regarding the foundation, I get where you were going with it because you were trying to make it look like an original stone gabled L, then a framed addition, and then the garage. But like Gary said, the massing and the slopes and the windows are all the same. So I would go ahead and keep the same foundation all the way across. So personally, I think the stone foundation would look great all the way across. And then the same, the consultant made the point about the brick chimney. I think they should both be stone. Same concept, just carry it one less material, just keep it all stone foundation, stone chimney. As far as the siding, I'll kind of disagree with the consultant. I mean, you can have both the horizontal and the shake. I think that's fine. And shake doesn't just have to be an accent. I actually have a house where my whole upper story is in shake, and that's original. So if you want to do the whole thing in shake siding, that's fine too. So I'm fine with the siding that's been chosen. Personally, I would do as few of treatments as possible. So one type of siding, stone, and then the garage could be a separate. That's fine. But 3 maybe instead of 4. How's that? And then the consultant had an issue with the windows being dark. I have no issue with that. I'm totally fine with dark colored windows. I think that was all of the, I guess, material questions. The consultant said something about not having the off-center chimney on the south elevation, and I disagree with that. Chimneys are off-center all the time. They're not always centered on the gable. So I'm fine with that. Otherwise, I think that's it. So.
Okay, thank you. And my comments are very much the same. There are too many materials. So I was like, where does my eye land? And I don't think you do any of them justice by having so many. I'm fine with the off-center chimney, but I think it needs to be stone. Actually, I kind of think it's cool to have it a little off-center. So I would say I reiterate many of the comments that have already been made. So the bottom line, it looks like there's still concern over mass and scale, and then the number of materials that we have in play. For the petitioner, what questions or clarifications do you need?
Actually, can I ask one more question? Maybe this might be a question for Slapson. Okay, so we're talking about the length on the side street. And so there's 2 houses that, well, one's completely new and one's a very large addition on Penny Lane that are really long and take up the whole lot. Now, I was not on the board when those were approved.
I don't think they would be approved at this point.
Okay, because I think what we have now is way better than those 2.
Yeah, this board would not have approved.
Okay, so I'm just curious as to the history and the reasoning behind those 2, which do take up the entire side street. And and like I said, this one is great on High Street. You know, this is small and massing is perfect on High Street.
It is perfect on High Street.
So I was just curious about those other 2 that got passed and allowed along Penny Lane.
Nikki, do you have any comments about that?
Yeah, so both myself and the applicant have looked into this, and you are correct that those are extremely analogous examples to what's being proposed, almost in fact to a T. I think Ms. Bryan also touches on some guidance that staff would give, which is that, maybe the intensity of the development of those homes on those lots is greater than we would encourage today. But Amy, they are very similar to what's being proposed.
Well, and it almost looks like there's two similar ones on the next street north too, along Eberly Hill. So I was just curious if there's a history with these side streets of allowing them to be longer, and what's the difference between those side streets and John Wright?
Yeah, I can tell you that all of the homes that you're mentioning do meet the maximum lot coverage of 50%. And the one on the south side of Eberly Hill, I think, is the smallest of the four that we're talking about. That's 73 South Riverview. But yeah, I mean, if there's something specific, I'm happy to look.
I just see really long houses in the historic district, and I wasn't on the board then.
Yeah.
So I saw two that are on side streets. There's two that aren't on side streets, so it's not as noticeable. But there's two on High Street just on the south or to the east of Waterford Drive that are very long houses.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a little harder to see because they're not immediately adjacent to a side street. So I'm just trying to get a feel for what was different in those other cases.
We've approved some additions that resulted in long houses, but the coverage was never close. So for me, the long house isn't an issue.
Okay.
It's the coverage, because it's when you get the coverage and you combine with the length. That's the difference between this, and we did a couple additions were pretty long and the garages are attached at the rear, but the coverages weren't anywhere close.
Okay, so it's more of a coverage issue then.
For me, it is, and then the way that house spreads over the lot as a result of the coverage. For me, I'm not so concerned about, because I think you almost want to wall John Wright Lane from your property if you were developing it. So I can kind of understand, creating that edge along there. But it's for me, it's just the coverage. That's it.
Okay, thanks. That's what I was looking for.
And our narrow lots are conducive. Our narrow lots and deep setbacks. A 15-foot setback is pretty generous. That's also a reason why you see the long additions throughout the district.
You good, Amy?
Yeah. I was just trying to figure out what the sticking point was compared to other stuff.
Okay.
Thanks.
So does the applicant have any questions or need clarification?
Please, if it pleases the board. Yes, Ms. Cram actually picked up the point that we were going to make. We did look at the other houses in the area. First point is that our house is actually is obviously in his historic residential, South residential, but it's also sort of transitional. I mean, when your eye looks at the house, you see John Wright and you see the chamber, which is in a different district. We did look at the homes on Riverview and modeled ours against that, but also made it smaller, less massive. It's not as tall, it's not as long. If you would superimpose our home against those homes on equal size lots, you'll find that our house is not as long, it's not as tall, it's not as wide. And then if you superimposed an aerial view to put it in the context of, for example, 97 South Riverview over ours compared to 143 South High, 155 South High, which is our neighbor, those houses are larger than their neighboring houses to a far greater degree than our proposed project would be. So and the lot coverages, we looked at the numbers on Riverview and used the same calculus, if you will, to compute permeable, semi-permeable, impermeable, and that was the precedent that we were looking at. So we do fit the area. Now, if the board the comment that we wouldn't approve it now, I appreciate that, and we've tried to modify to make it fit, but it also is consistent with very similar lots on these side streets on Penny and Everly. I mean, it's a mirror image. In fact, I would argue to the contrary. Those abut other residences, and ours abuts the commercial part of Old Dublin. So this wasn't, this was intentional, to be candid. This was intentional to fit within the area, to design the house, to make use of the lot, but within the parameters. Our position is that a waiver is not requested because a waiver is not required, and literally, you could appreciate the time that's spent to sort of put all this together, and I could submit sort of chapter and verse on how we do fit within the area. And there are definitions of what a hard surface is and what a semi-permeable surface is and how it drains, and they're all in the code, and we can cite those in our application. So our position is we're not requesting a waiver on lot coverage because we don't feel that one is necessary, but we also understand that we would have to show the board that that is the case. We think that the size of the house is consistent with very similar lots, like literally 0.25 acre lots on corners against alleys that are abutting residential, where ours is adjacent to a commercial property. So we'd ask the board to take that all in consideration and not look at this as an outlier, but is consistent with the neighborhood. And it's also consistent with how it is treated against adjacent properties, like our neighbor to the south, just as the ones on Everly and Penny Hill are fit within the context of smaller homes next to them. So that's how we came across with this. I'll let Rich, discuss the materials. We're, obviously very flexible. We were trying actually to be responsive by breaking up the size with different materials, but Rich can speak to that if it's appropriate.
Well, if that's a cue for me to speak, I'll do so. We were looking at our presentation that we made last month. I deliberately showed you drawings that we did not delineate materials on because we wanted to have that discussion with you. And part of our discussion was that we would use materials as a way to further delineate the masses of this to reduce the visual size of it. I don't have a problem. A couple of commission members or board members, excuse me, have said that we might have fewer materials. I'm fine with that. We can certainly work with that. What's important, probably more than anything else, is that the building that we're all referring to as the High Street Cottage part needs to remain distinct in massing and in materials from the rest of the building. So if we had one main cladding material for that piece, one main cladding material for the garage piece, and then a third material in the middle, I could live with that. I don't have a problem with changing the foundation to stone, changing the chimney to stone, and minor details like that will all come up in our next presentation. But I think the main thing is that we intend for this to look like a collection of masses. As Gary said, perhaps it's an additive process. And in instances where buildings are added to and the buildings are very different, those are usually situations where those additions occur with a great deal of time elapsing between them. You could look at this as additions that happen without a great deal of time elapsing between them. And so they're similar in character. We have noted from previous presentations before the board, not ours, but others, that the board's concerned with fenestration, that it be similar and in proportion, and we've done that on this. The guidelines call for buildings like this to have steep pitched roofs and have simple details, and we've done that. So in my opinion, we've done everything that's reasonable and possible to do to break the massing of this down so that it appears to fit in the with the rest of the district. I can't say it any better than Lance did, except to add that the context of this house is not the lot next door, it's the entire historic district.
Okay. Any other comments? Do we have any public comments on this?
We do have one public comment, and I will read it to you. This public comment stems out of a phone conversation that I had with a resident and a property owner. Give me 1 second. So, hi, I am emailing you to express concern for the proposed home on High Street. My dad owns the brick house at 119 South High Street that has recently been rented for a salon, and we have concerns about the space in the back where we are assuming will be a 3-car garage. Is it possible to see the site layout of the property with the blueprints of the home? Thank you for your help, Karen Adolph. So with that, I did provide her the additional information she requested, but felt that those comments should be passed along.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
For me, the comment still is, I think a clarity on this pervious and impervious is, for me, is,
yeah.
Because as you say, if somehow we're, well, what have we done in the past? I think it's to Gary's point originally, you know, how did we define certain aspects, A, for me to be consistent, and B, to help staff to make sure we're doing, because I think if we do certain things, it's going to come up again, right? I mean, trying to find a way to put certain aspects on people's lots. And if this is one way to get other space, I mean, I think it comes up again. So we need to put something around this so we can understand this a little better.
I agree, because I think we need to be consistent
yes.
how we've judged others in the past, and because starting to make exceptions, I think always is a slippery slope.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Amy's point about, you know, gravel around a flower bed, for me, I get that that's a different thing. But as we're trying to take impervious, what would traditionally been impervious surfaces, and make them pervious.
Yes.
Where are we in that particular thing?
So, Nikki, we may need to get legal involved in terms of the interpretation of that.
Yeah, definitely. We can certainly consult them and report back to you all.
Okay. And make sure that the applicant is aware of what that decision is as well, because that could very well impact their decisions.
Definitely. We'll make sure to share that.
Okay.
I have a question, because I want to follow up on the one point Mr. Schneer made. We know there's one house that's always pointed to, why did the board ever approve that? And that's one of them that's been referred to comparatively here in terms of the length. But I know in the time I've been on the board, which is not really all that long, no one's come with a coverage using these standards at this to this extent. So, but I'm kind of curious if some of those earlier, not the one that's a real problem, but if some of those earlier examples that were cited, and I know the ones, are their coverages, do we know if their coverages using the standards of the code that we're using, are they under 50, or do we know? Because I think that would be helpful to know.
And on that same, if you're going to calculate those, could you have, if this comes back to us, could you tell us the percentage of lot coverage for the chamber parcel to the north and to the residents to their immediately west of them? Because on an aerial, those look really full lot coverage. So if you're calculating numbers, that would be helpful.
Yeah, happy to.
Okay. All right. I believe we are finished. If there are no further questions or discussions on this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any communications?
I do have a couple of things, and then maybe Nikki might have some too. We did put in last week all the materials for the code and the guidelines based on your review comments from the previous month's discussion, with some additional background that you all requested, again, for your consideration. And I think in the memo, we did highlight some items for further discussion. So we'll touch on that next week, but that is available and has been for a little while. So that's in there. In addition to, I did add in today the minutes from that joint planning commission and ARB meeting. Those meeting minutes for that meeting need to be approved at this upcoming meeting. So not tonight, but those have been added since I put in those original materials. We overlooked that from a procedural standpoint that you all need to vote on those as well. So that's in there. And then we wanted to make a request of the board to see if you would be willing to have an additional meeting in August. We have a number of items that either from an applicant timing standpoint need to happen sooner, but then also just given our current caseload, again, we've gone, a significant amount of time tonight, and our regularly scheduled meeting in August has a significant number of items. So trying to be cognizant of your time. I don't want to abuse this virtual format. It does make it a little easier to meet, but we wanted to see if you all would be amenable to that. We were looking at August 12th or August the 19th as suggested dates to do that. And I wanted to see if you all would be willing to do that. I know, again, we've had a lot of meetings and a lot of things, but
yeah,
I'm fine.
I'm meeting until midnight. So, okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
And I'm okay either date if we need to have another meeting.
The 12th is my preference, but
Okay.
I could make the 19th work if needed.
Okay.
I'm open to.
The 12th's okay for me.
12th is fine for me.
Okay. All right. Well, then let's go with that. That way it gives us a little bit of space in between so you don't have to have weeks with back-to-back meetings.
Good.
I appreciate that. Thank you all very much for doing that. I know the applicants will appreciate it too. So.
Okay.
That's
So
all
this will be a regular meeting with cases, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll definitely have applicant cases, but then we do have the temporary signs, which I just didn't have time to complete in time for this meeting. So we can add that to that, and then we may have some additional cases.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Nikki, do you have anything else?
Nope, I don't have anything to add. Just thank you all for your continued efforts.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Thank you. And we do need to reschedule FAD.
Yes, he will be back in August. So
okay, that's fine.
We will make that happen. And
that might be something we could include on the 12th too, potentially, especially if we're bringing that temporary sign code. That's a case he's been familiar with, so that actually might work out pretty well. So we can.
Okay, great.
Okay,
great. Okay. Anybody have anything else?
I just wanted to compliment Nikki and Jenny. The documentation that was dropped off at our houses, I thought was very impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
I actually have one question. So in P&Z, we always had consent agenda items for stuff that were like slammed, like, yeah, okay, it's a sign and nothing. Why don't you guys do consent agenda for this meeting?
I mean, we could look into that. That just is not a procedure that we have used before, but if you all want to, I mean, we could talk to legal. I don't think there's any issue with that because you would still have the opportunity to pull the case. And if we had public comment.
Yeah. So just to explain, to those who don't know, can you want to tell them what that, like the consent agenda means?
And council has it as well. So it's the ability to prove, so if we have an applicant that agrees to the conditions and staff is approval, and it's a pretty minor project. So I think maybe you're getting at the first two cases on this agenda. We wouldn't have to
I was
go
thinking
through
the
a
sign
long,
cases.
Yeah, we wouldn't have to go through a long presentation. You would just call those meetings or those applications together, and you could approve those at the beginning of the meeting without a presentation and without any discussion or deliberation. That would mean that you all are in agreement, and we would include that as part of the agenda.
Would we determine that we're going to do that after we look at the packet and everybody's fine with it?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, you'd have time. We would make a recommendation and put these items that the applicants agreed to at the beginning of the meeting as potential consent agenda items, and then you all would review your materials, and as part of the meeting, if somebody wanted to pull a case because they had questions, then we would just put that back on the agenda for review like any other case. But if nobody had any questions or any concerns and there was no public comment related to that, then we could proceed with just approving it at the beginning and then expedite the cases. I think it's
okay.
So like Kathy, it would your agenda would specifically say case 1 and 2 are eligible for the consent agenda, and you would say, you know, does anyone have any comment or any questions or any reason to pull those cases? And assuming anyone said no, then we only have to take one vote.
Okay.
So it saves a ton of time. So then, so, you know, not that it was a ton of time, but you know, the 15 minutes we spent on those 2 sign cases could have been handled in like 2 minutes.
Yeah, this is something Jen and I've been talking about with some of these signs, that there's really no need for a lot of discussion. So that's a good.
Yeah, so I was just curious if that was something that I mean, I'm fine if we don't. I just want to throw that out there. If it's something people would be interested in to kind of speed up a simple sign, it might.
Yeah.
We can try it.
Yep. So I have a feeling the reason it hasn't done in the past is our agendas it's rare when we have 5 issues, and it's rare when we have something that is as lengthy in conversation as the last item. So, you know, one board I'm before a lot has a consent agenda every week, but they'll have 15 items on their agenda. So I'm happy if you want to do that. And I think earlier board members made suggestions like get paint colors and get things like that off, and driveways and things like that off of our menu of things to review. So that may be a way to incorporate those approvals as well, those simple approvals in the consent agenda.
Well, I think we're working towards having paint colors once the palette is established, and building materials once we get an approved list, that staff can approve those unless someone wants an exception for those. Because the cases that we are discussing anymore seem to be much longer. I know when I first started, there were a lot of small things, but some of these things are pretty meaty. Okay.
Okay, great. Great suggestion. Thank you. Okay.
All right. Then I say this meeting is adjourned.
Great. Cindy, can you push the magic button, please?